speak, I've got something really special for you this morning. Al just mentioned that Dean and Katie are running Alpha in their home. Dean and Katie, for those of you who haven't met them, have joined our church in the last few months. And a few weeks ago, I was chatting to Katie and hearing her story, and it's a real treat. And so I've invited Katie. Why don't you come up, Katie? Katie's going to share a little bit of how she came to faith. Let's give Katie a round of applause. Come on, Katie. It's not easy to share, and it's a very vulnerable thing to do, and we're so grateful. It's a real treat. So, Katie, do you want to just tell everybody maybe a little bit about yourself and about yourself before you found faith in Jesus?
Okay. So I was born in Ipswich, and I was raised in church. My mother took me to church as a little girl, and I attended church till I was about 13, 14. And then I just really turned my back on the church. I feel like I kind of got sucked into the world and all of the things that were sort of tempting out there. And I ended up moving to London when I was about 19, 20. I ended up in a relationship with somebody who was very abusive, and I was introduced to Class A drugs, and I ended up having a very serious addiction to drugs, which lasted for quite a few years. I was kind of estranged from my family. I was living quite a dark life. I was very, very, very far away from Christ, and all that came with that, really, just isolated from community, friendship, and anything to do with the love of God. So I then met my husband now, who was at the time my knight in shining armour, and I was able to get off drugs and start to kind of heal. And then, with his permission, I'm not going to ruin his story, because I'm sure he'll come up and share his story with you another day. But my husband then sadly fell into addiction. So we'd come back to Ipswich. I had 2 young children. I was now with a husband who was struggling with addiction, although I was clean and sort of doing okay. And I was feeling a bit hopeless, really, a little bit lost. I had family, friends. I got off the drugs, but something was still missing.
So what happened? What happened then? Go on, tell us.
So,
how did you find it?
About 6, no, it's longer than that now, gosh. So my daughter's 9, and I needed to start thinking about getting her into a primary school. So I think all the seeds that my mum had sown as a young girl, I was kind of like, I'd like her to go to a really moralistic school with good values, and I'd like her to go to a Christian school, even though I wasn't a Christian. So I was trying to get her into Christian school. I think there was a little bit of colluding going on with the church. They were just like, just get her in front of the gospel. If she's coming for the wrong reasons, let's get her to hear about Jesus again. So I started attending church to get the points, if you like, to get my daughter in. And there were many people praying for me. I had many friends of my mother's and people within the church who I knew from a young girl who were praying for me. My best friend of 35 years, who was a Christian, was praying for me, and she invited me to an event where I met with the living God, and there was no doubt in my mind. I was filled with the Spirit. I knew that he wanted to love me and take me as I was, and I think I'd bought this lie that my sins were unforgivable and that I'd lived such a dark life, and that, I'd listened to the lies of the enemy, that my sins were that bad that I couldn't be forgiven, and he told me very different he was that
very
day.
Good.
And that was the start of my journey, probably about 6-7 years ago, yeah.
Wonderful. And so, Katie, tell us, what difference has Jesus made to your life?
Everything, absolutely everything. He's changed my family, my marriage, my home, my life, my purpose. Things aren't perfect, that's not what it is. But just everything about our home life, what we live for now, what we do. It's just, he's wonderful. Just an incredible Lord. Yeah.
And you're wanting to share that with other people, aren't you, Katie? And you're doing Alpha in your home.
Yeah. So we had a lot of incredible Christians really journey with us and wrap around me and my husband on our walk very early on. And I think quite staple to us, kind of really being able to understand what it meant to be a Christian and a disciple. And so for us, we just have a real heart of being able to give that back.
Yeah.
And we just have a real heart for broken people, because we're broken people too.
All of us, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie, so much. Yeah, that's wonderful. Don't go a minute. Well, yeah, let's give Katie a round of applause. And just so encouraged by that story, aren't we? So encouraged, and encouraged by the people who prayed. And just be encouraged for the people that you're praying for. Keep praying. And just really encouraged that Alpha has sprung up in Dean and Katie's home. We were wanting Alpha to move forward and weren't quite sure how Alpha was going to move forward. And one of the things that has happened is that Dean and Katie are running Alpha in their home as well. So we've got these 2 Alpha courses running. And one of the things that, if you would like to support that, one of the things that the 2 things you can do really, one is to pray, and the other is to bake cakes on a Wednesday night for the people who are coming to Dean and Katie's Alpha. So if you would like, please all be praying. And if you on a Wednesday night in the next 10 weeks might be able to bake a cake, please talk to Katie or to Dean. We'd love to be able to do that. And if you would like to think, it's a great thing. If you have friends who you think actually inviting them in to do Alpha at church might be a big step, but I could play the videos at home and maybe give people some cake and do that. Do come and talk to me, come and talk to Katie. We want people to find out about Jesus however they can. So please do. We'd love to support you. If you think, I wouldn't know what to say or do, we'd love to support you in leading Alpha in your home, if that is something that you might like to do as well, or invite people along to us. We want people to find out about Jesus and to find the transformation that Katie's found. It was wonderful. Let's give her a round of applause. Thanks, Katie. So we are continuing today our series in Matthew's Gospel, and we're in chapter 2, and we're going to be looking at the story of the escape to Egypt. And so the title of the talk this morning is Rescue. And when I heard Katie's story, I just really knew that I wanted her to speak this morning, because her story is of God rescuing her. And now what is so powerful is that God is using her in the rescue of others. And that is the story for each of us. So some of our stories of rescue might be less dramatic or more dramatic. But we've all got a story of how Jesus has rescued us. And Jesus wants to use us in the rescue of others. So rescue is the title of the talk this morning. I'm going to come on to it, the passage in a moment, but I just want to tell you a story as I begin. It's on page 966 in the Bibles if you want to find it. Matthew chapter 2. But I want to tell you a story as I begin. One of my childhood memories is of the Sunday school nativity play. The Sunday school nativity play. And on a weekend in December when I was growing up, there would always be the Sunday school play rehearsal, followed by the Sunday school play Christmas party. You had to go to the rehearsal in order to be allowed to go to the Christmas party. And then the following day, on the Sunday, all the parents and family and things would be there for the Sunday school nativity play. And each year, it was quite an event in my little church in the Welsh Valleys growing up. And every year, there would be a slightly different theme of the Sunday school nativity play. And one particular year, the focus was all about Herod. Unusual, you might say. But the focus was all on Herod. There were the Roman soldiers. And these 2 little twin boys were Roman soldiers. And in the Sunday school play rehearsal, the Roman soldiers had run at a steady pace behind Mary and Joseph, and they'd made it to Egypt in the church hall kitchen. In the actual Sunday school play, they decided that running fast would be more fun. So they legged it after Mary and Joseph. Mary and Joseph had to run quickly, and they eventually made it to the kitchen, at which point all the parents kind of sighed, a gasp of relief. Mary and Joseph were safe in Egypt. The baby Jesus had been rescued from the soldiers. Would have been a bit interesting if he hadn't been. Jesus was rescued, and Jesus was rescued in order to rescue. He came to rescue. Dean and Katie have been rescued, and now they're playing their part in the rescue of others. And God's, in sometimes more dramatic, sometimes less dramatic ways, rescues each one of us. So the escape to Egypt that we're going to read about in a moment is a part of the nativity story that we don't often talk about in nativity services and crib services. It's not often on Christmas cards because it's about the mass murder by a tyrannical ruler. It's not fuzzy and sentimental. It's about refugees fleeing for their lives. But Matthew wrote about it. Matthew included it in his gospel, and so we're going to read about it today. We're in Matthew chapter 2, starting at verse 13 on page 966 in the Bibles. So, verse 13. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more." After Herod had died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. So we've been reading through these first chapters of Matthew's gospel, we've seen that Matthew is writing the historical narrative, and as well as writing about what happened, Matthew is proclaiming good news about who Jesus is. He's proclaiming good news about Jesus, the rescuer. Matthew doesn't give every detail, he doesn't give every single moment in Jesus' life, but has chosen these specific parts of his life because they happened, and also because they tell us something about who Jesus is. So Matthew is saying that Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, he's the fulfillment of the Old Testament. And already in chapter 1 and 2, we've seen prophecies fulfilled about the virgin birth. We've seen prophecies fulfilled that he would be born in Bethlehem. And then there are references in this part of chapter 2. There are actually 3 references. And these 3 references are what I want us to focus on this morning, because they tell us something about who Jesus is. So first of all, the Holy Family escaped to Egypt. And Matthew's showing us that it's significant, it matters that they went to Egypt. Matthew quotes Hosea 11, verse 1. He says, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." And Hosea 11, verse 1, is about God talking about his love for the people of Israel, God's love for the Jewish people. And he's saying that Hosea is saying, one way that God showed his love for the Jewish people, for the people of Israel, was he brought them out of slavery in Egypt. He saved them, God saved the people from slavery in Egypt. So Matthew is showing that this is not like a specific prophecy like the virgin birth, but he's saying that the whole story of the Old Testament foreshadows the New Testament. Jesus is the greater Moses. God in love sent Jesus, and as Moses brought people out of slavery in Egypt, Jesus comes to bring us all out of slavery to sin. Pharaoh had tried to kill Moses as a baby. God saved him. And now Herod, similarly, tried to kill Jesus, but God saved him. God rescued Moses in order to rescue people of Israel from slavery, and God rescued Jesus in order that Jesus would be able to die on the cross, pay the price that was needed to rescue us from slavery to sin. Jesus came to rescue. It's good news. He came to rescue you, came to rescue me, because we cannot rescue ourselves. He was the only one who could pay the price for sin. And we heard Katie's story about how God rescued her. And we all need the rescue of Jesus. We need to ask the Holy Spirit. For some of us, we might think, I don't know whether I do need to be rescued. I'm not that bad. And I just encourage you, if that's you, to say, Lord, show me my need of rescue. Show me my need of you. Show me my need. Jesus rescues. He comes to rescue each one of us from slavery to sin. Jesus came to seek and save the lost. Came to seek and save you. Came to seek and save everyone you know. Everyone you don't know. Comes to seek and save. He comes to rescue. So, Herod ordered for all baby boys under 2 to be killed. And I mean, just let the horror of that sink in. Awful. He did this because of the information the wise men had given him that the baby that had been born was the king of the Jews. And he wanted to ensure that this baby, who was a threat to him, was killed. And it's almost unimaginable, isn't it? That all baby boys under 2 should be killed. Imagine the trauma in that community. Imagine the horror for those parents and families and communities. Imagine the grief, the fear. You know, we've heard this lots of times, but can you imagine it? Awful. And the second reference to the Old Testament comes in verse 18. It's from Jeremiah 31:15, and it says this. It says, "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted." So Matthew is using this quote from Jeremiah to describe the deep grief, the pain of the mass murder of children. So this quotation, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted. And it gives just a sense of the desolation and the despair of these people who lost their children in mass murder. And the reference to Rachel is from Genesis, Rachel, Jacob's wife in Genesis, mother of Joseph with the Technicolor coat, you know. And to get our context. And Rachel was also the mother of Benjamin, and she died giving birth to Benjamin. So Rachel was known as the sorrowful mother. And this idea of sorrow. And in Jeremiah's day, Rachel's tomb was near Bethlehem, and they would walk past Rachel's tomb as they went into exile in Babylon. So as they left their homes, they walked past the tomb of the sorrowful mother. So it was a place of desolation, despair, grief, leaving their homes, going into exile. Rachel weeping, refusing to be comforted. I think that phrase, refusing to be comforted, is the profoundness of grief sometimes. As we maybe support each other, sometimes people need to be refused to be comforted because it's too painful. And sometimes we come and we want to offer comfort and support. We want to make things better. And actually sometimes we just need to sit with people as they refuse to be comforted. Because actually, in the midst of the mass murder of children, a bit of comfort and helpful words are not going to do much. They refuse to be comforted. Sometimes we can't fix things We can't sort things out. We just need to be there in the midst of the sadness. Babies were dying. Weeping was necessary. Mourning was necessary. There's also, isn't there, in our world, kind of a desire for this perfection, and especially I think, we're in the midst of the nativity story. Christmas for us feels like a while away, but this is the nativity story still that we're reading through, and there is a sense, I think, at Christmas that things need to be perfect, and they're often not. We become then aware at Christmas of our lack of perfect gifts and perfect relationships. We're just aware of the lack. And underneath, it can feel like a facade, because often underneath there is pain and sadness. And this was the truth about the first Christmas as well. It was not perfect. There was pain and there was sadness and there was life under threat. And we just don't put it on the Christmas cards because we don't really want to acknowledge it. And it's so true, isn't it, today as we look at our world and war-torn countries. Matthew is showing us that first Christmas was not pain-free. Jesus understands. Jesus experienced life as a refugee. Jesus' life was under threat. Children around him, his age, were all being killed. There was weeping and great mourning. And we seem to see constantly, don't we, images of refugees on our TV screens. Those small boats crossing the channel is a constant political debate, back and forth. And small boats are dehumanizing and awful, painful. But this account reminds us that Jesus stands with the refugee because Jesus was a refugee. Jesus knows what it's like. Jesus was there. The slaughter of children happens in our world. Mass murder happens in our world. We think back to World War II and concentration camps, but more recently in Myanmar and Gaza and Sudan, people's lives are under threat. And Jesus doesn't stand at a distance and look on. Jesus is in the middle of it. Jesus, God in human form, knows what it is to be a refugee, knows what it is to be in pain. His life was not, he didn't have special privileges as God on earth. Jesus felt the painful reality of human life. There was weeping and great mourning and people refusing to be comforted. And Jesus didn't stand at a distance and look on. He didn't stand at a distance and maybe give a food package. No, Jesus was right in the middle of it. Jesus was feeling the pain. He was there. He was the refugee. And Matthew says later in the gospel, in chapter 25, it says, when we clothe the naked or visiting the imprisoned, it's like we're visiting him. And so maybe can I encourage you, when you see refugees on your TV screen, to see Jesus? When we speak up and care for the lost and the least and the lost in our world, we're caring for Jesus. That's what he's calling us to do. And sometimes we just want to remove all the pain quickly. But sometimes we need to know, and this is what we see here, that Jesus is with, the pain doesn't always go quickly, but he is with us in the pain of life. He's there. He's experienced it. Jesus stands with us when we are in pain. He has been in pain. He knows what it is. And then the final reference to the Old Testament comes in verse 23. And it says, so was fulfilled what was said through the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. So the Holy Family, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, they'd escaped to Egypt, stayed there for a while. Herod died, and then Joseph was told by an angel in a dream that it was safe to return. There was no 24/7 news in those days. You couldn't get a little bleep on your phone. Herod's died. It was an angel in a dream. Joseph realized that Herod's son had replaced him, and so was cautious, and so went to this backwater of Nazareth. And Nazareth was a despised place in Jesus' day, you know. When the disciple Nathanael was called to follow Jesus at the beginning of John's gospel, he couldn't believe that Jesus came from Nazareth. He said in John 1:46, Nazareth, can anything good come from there? Nazareth was a backwater, a nowhere place, an unknown town, and yet Jesus came from there. It's powerful stuff, really. Jesus turns the power structures of this world on their head. He came from an unimportant place. And so already in the nativity story, Matthew chapter 2, we've seen that Jesus, born in a stable, life under threat, had to escape to Egypt, came from Nazareth, the back of beyond, the nowhere place, somewhere no one wanted to live. And Matthew's making the point. Jesus is Lord of all. Jesus, King of kings, God on earth, and yet he came from a backwater town. Christianity is not about where you're from or what you achieve. Christianity is about bringing our weakness to God and receiving his rescue. Jesus turns all our ideas about status on their heads. Matthew chapter 2 shows us that Jesus came to rescue sinners. Jesus experienced the bitter and painful reality of life. The consequences of sin he experienced. Came from a backwater town, came to rescue all people, not just powerful people. Jesus came to rescue significant people and insignificant people, important people, unimportant people. He came for everyone. And then Matthew chapter 2 gives us some contrasting examples about how to respond to Jesus, doesn't it? Because last week we've seen the response of the wise men. You know, the wise men following the star, bowing down to worship, bringing these gifts. And then we see in this passage Joseph believing that it was a virgin birth. Trusting God, obeying, taking the family to Egypt, risk protecting his family, making sacrifices. And then in this passage, we also see the response of Herod to Jesus. Herod was under threat, holding on to power, angry that the Magi had been looking for someone who was been born the king of the Jews, angry that somebody else should be a king. Herod wanted all the power, holding on tightly to power, wanted to make sure that all baby boys were killed to get this one baby boy that was a threat to him. An extreme reaction, I think. But what can we learn from this? Where can we see in slightly more hidden ways how we might respond as a result of feeling threatened? Where we might respond rather than out of being secure in who we are in Jesus, our responses might be a consequence of our brokenness and our fear and threat, rather than deciding to give up our control to Jesus, to bow the knee to him, to surrender to him. Simon Walker is a Christian who's written a book called The Undefended Leader. It's called Leading Out of Who You Are. And Walker talks about the importance of our inner lives, getting our inner lives sorted, bringing ourselves to Jesus, inviting Jesus to give us that security that we need, so that dealing with the things that have been painful to us, dealing with our pain, dealing with our insecurity, dealing where we might feel threatened. Walker says the inner character of the leader, that's the leaders, all of us who want to lead other people to Jesus, be involved with his rescue. The inner character of the leader is revealed and written in large letters on the pages of history. Herod was under threat, and his lack of security was revealed and led to sin in an extreme way. And I wonder where sometimes, as a result of our insecurities, all of us, we respond, and we also sin, maybe in much smaller ways, but nevertheless, we respond in a bad way. I remember somebody saying, as a phrase, your petticoat is showing. Your petticoat is showing. And what they meant was, it's leaking. You're leaking the not so good stuff. Do you know? Your response is leaking the bad stuff. The response is leaking the sin, is showing the insecurity underneath. That's what Herod was doing, wasn't he? He was insecure, he was threatened, and that led to sin. God wants us to be secure in him, surrender to him, trusting him, knowing his complete, unconditional love for us. And he wants us to put others first. He wants us not to act under threat, not to act under wanting to control. Jesus wants us to give up control of our lives, to surrender to his will. He wants our actions to spring from a deep security in him, knowing who we are in him, rather than from any of our actions to spill from feeling threatened or broken or fearful. The only right response to Jesus is that of the wise men, isn't it? They bowed down, they worshipped, they looked for Jesus, they gave him gifts. Whereas Herod clung on to power, and that resulted in sin. When we cling on to control of our lives or cling on to control of the lives around us, it results in pain and sin. And we need to bow the knee to Jesus, to rest in his love, surrender to his ways. Jesus rescues. He comes to us in the painful reality of life. He offers rescue. And the question is, have you received it? Have you received the rescue of Jesus? Will you bow down before him and let him use you to reach out and rescue other people? Shall we stand together?